Have you ever thought about what it really means to revisit a story you love, but, see it through a totally different lens?
Yeah, like what do you actually gain?
Yeah.
And, well, what might get lost in translation?
Exactly. Today, we're diving into that very idea with the big 2025 live-action version of How to Train Your Dragon. Dean DeBlois, the original director, he's back at the helm.
Which is interesting in itself.
It is. So our mission here is to really unpack the sources you've given us, all these reviews, these different perspectives. We want to pull out the key insights.
Figure out what worked, what maybe didn't quite land.
Right, and what this whole adaptation really says about, where movies are heading. Because the core tension seems to be this. How does a remake that's almost shot for shot stack up when it's, live action?
Mm-hmm. New skin, same story, basically.
So let's get into it. The first thing that, just leaps off the page from these sources is how incredibly faithful this remake is. Almost startlingly so.
It really is. It's, the loyalty is kind of unwavering, isn't it? The film, it genuinely just retraces beat for beat the original's emotional journey.
Every key moment.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You've got Hiccup, awkward but thoughtful, capturing Toothless, that bond forming.
That iconic bond.
Exactly. And those themes we loved, prejudice, empathy, growth, Hiccup challenging the village, it's all there.
So the heart is intact.
Seems so.
Yeah.
Entertainment Weekly, they really stressed how it sticks closely to the original storyline, keeping the heart and tone, but trying to boost the realism.
Okay.
And visually, Phil Mikita mentioned the CGI, praising how Toothless glides with weight and texture, making the dragons feel, real.
That sounds great for fans, that level of faithfulness. But here's where it gets interesting. This devotion wasn't universally praised, was it? Was there a downside to being so faithful?
Absolutely. Definitely a double-edged sword. And this is where, the real critique comes in. While that loyalty is comforting, sure, a lot of critics found it, overwhelmingly familiar.
More like an echo than an evolution.
An echo, right. Like you've heard this song before.
Precisely. The movie Time actually used that metaphor, called it a cover band nailing your favorite song. It hits the nostalgia notes beautifully, sure, but...
No surprises.
Exactly. No real surprises, no artistic innovation. It really throws that dilemma into sharp focus, doesn't it? Stick close and risk being derivative, or change things and risk alienating things.
It's a tough balance. So for you listening, is that comfort of nostalgia enough? Or do you really crave something new in a remake?
A key question.
Definitely. Okay, speaking of those visuals, though, even with the familiarity, the sources seem pretty united that this film is, a spectacle.
Oh, visually, it sounds like a real feast. A lot of that is down to Bill Pope, the cinematographer.
Right.
Capturing these huge, sweeping landscapes, the flight sequences.
Yeah.
Apparently, they have this real palpable grandeur.
You can feel it. Yeah. Geek culture called the action scenes stirring as ever. Sweeping, vertigo-inducing, utterly joyful. Especially, they said, in IMAX.
Gotta see it big then.
Seems like it. And Tatler Asia pointed out something key about Toothless, that even with the realistic CGI, he keeps just enough of his animated expressiveness. Still very emotive.
That's crucial for Toothless. Okay, but it sounds like maybe not all the visual choices landed perfectly. Yeah. Despite the spectacle.
That's right. While the scale is impressive, there was this recurring criticism about the color palette. Artificially dim, gray-toned was a phrase used.
Oh, really? Not vibrant like the animation?
Apparently not. Some felt it actually detracted from the immersion. UPI was quite harsh, saying the dim, gray aesthetic looks like every other dreary modern movie.
Ouch. Dreary for Dragon.
Yeah, and they argued the CGI, sometimes instead of blending in, just highlighted its own artificiality. Mm-hmm. But Wiretap went even further, calling the look a sludgy mess, suggesting the dark visuals and maybe some muddled camera work actually slowed things down.
Wow. Okay, so a potentially divisive aesthetic choice then. It makes you think, doesn't it? How much does that overall look, the color, the lighting, affect your connection to a story?
Definitely something to consider.
Interesting. So, moving beyond the dragons and the look, let's talk about the humans, the performances. Sounds like maybe a bit of a mixed flight there, too.
It absolutely was, yeah. A real mixed bag. Mason Thames is Hiccup. He apparently brings this grounded, vulnerable, quality, solid start.
Okay.
But some critics felt he just lacks the spark of Jay Baruchel's original voice work. The Guardian noted he played Hiccup slightly more petulant than petrified.
Oh, interesting shift. Petulant.
Yeah, and Nick Frost as Gobber. Apparently a missed opportunity for comic depth, which is a shame, right?
Shoes to fill there. What about stoic? Gerard Butler came back.
Ah, yes. And he got widespread praise. Tatler Asia called his performance robust and weathered, really bringing that emotional weight again. A definite plus.
Good to hear. And Astrid, Nico Parker, took on that role.
Right. And her performance sparked some interesting discussion. Tom's Guide felt she presented a more empowered and developed Astrid. Sounds positive.
It does. An update.
But Y2 criticized what they saw as an abrupt emotional shift in her story arc.
Yeah.
Like maybe some character beats felt a bit rushed or didn't quite land logically.
Okay. So inconsistencies, maybe. It really does make you think, how vital is the casting when you're remaking something with such a beloved original voices? How much does that comparison impact your enjoyment?
It's a huge factor for many people.
Totally. And speaking of things feeling maybe rushed or not quite landing, pacing and tone, that seems to be another area where this deep dive shows some, well, criticisms.
They do, yeah. The runtime, first off, around 125 minutes.
Which is longer than the original.
Significantly.
Yeah.
Nearly 30 minutes longer. And several sources mentioned a pacing drag because of it.
Ah, the dreaded pacing drag.
Exactly. Roger Ebert noted that extended scenes and bloated exposition kind of diluted the original's tight lyrical flow. You know, the original was so efficient.
Right, it moved.
And UPI echoed that. Worrying the longer time dilutes the story's message with overly busy shenanigans. So adding more didn't necessarily make it better. Might have made it feel slower.
That classic remake trap. More isn't always more.
Isn't that the truth?
Okay, and then there's that tonal shift we touched on earlier. It sounds like it didn't just look darker, it felt darker too.
Precisely. It definitely veers into darker territory than the animation. But Wycombe called it abrasively dark. Visually and tonally.
Abrasively, wow.
Yeah. Filled with apparently stern adults, foreboding environments. Quite a different vibe from the wonder and vibrancy of the first film. And The Guardian again pointed to that drab cinematography and artificial CGI color palette as feeding into this heavier mood.
So it really raises a question for you, the viewer.
Yeah.
Does that darker, more quote-unquote realistic tone actually enhance a fantasy story like this? Or does it take away some of the magic you loved?
Especially one known for joy and wonder. It's a valid question.
It really is. But okay, despite those points about structure and tone, it does seem like the core stuff, the themes, the music that really landed well, provided a strong anchor.
Oh, absolutely. They served as a really powerful counterweight to some of the criticisms.
Like the heart was still beating strong?
Seems like it.
Yeah.
The Washington Post observed they kept those powerful life lessons, bridging divides, self-reflection. They highlighted Hiccup's line. I looked at him and I saw myself. Still impactful.
That line gives me chills even now.
Right. And representation, that got nods too. Cinema blend like the multicultural casting, like Nico Parker as Astrid, and said the film handles it well, showing Berk as a melting pot.
That's a positive modern touch.
Definitely. And then the music. John Powell returning. Huge high point for nearly everyone.
Oh, thank goodness. His score is iconic.
It really is. Phil Makita, others, they all talked about how those familiar themes just shine. Tracks like Test Drive, plus new stuff, apparently it all resonates.
Goosebumps just thinking about Test Drive.
Exactly. The Movie Time called the score a triumphant return, blending that nostalgia perfectly with freshness.
Fantastic.
It just shows how those core elements, the story's heart, its sound, can really ground a film, even if other aspects get debated. It makes you think, how crucial is a powerful score to your cinematic experience?
For me, immensely. It can elevate everything. So, okay, we've talked strengths, weaknesses, the nuances. How did it all shake out? How did it land with critics and, financially?
Well, the reception overall was mixed to positive. It landed a 77% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay, decent. Not universally acclaimed, but solid.
Pretty much.
Right.
Critics generally acknowledge the technical skill, the emotional beats that worked, but they often mention that derivative nature.
Right, the echo problem.
Exactly. Though AP News was quite positive, calling it a successful revitalization, giving it 3.5 out of 4 stars. So it definitely had strong supporters.
And the box office, did people show up?
They did. It performed well. Topped the domestic box office initially, and I think the sources said it grossed around $472 million worldwide by early July 2025.
Wow, okay, so audiences were definitely interested.
Which brings us back to that big question, really, for you listening.
Yeah.
What does your ideal remake look like? Is it this kind of faithful recreation? Or do you want something that really dares to be different?
It's the central debate, isn't it?
It really is. So just to kind of synthesize the pros and cons we've discussed.
Lay them out for us.
Okay, strengths. Definitely the stunning cinematography, those IMAX flight scenes sound incredible. Toothless, a visual and emotional success, keeps its charm.
Good.
The core themes still resonate powerfully. John Powell's score is a massive win. And the multicultural casting was seen as a sensitive plus.
Okay, solid strengths and the weaknesses.
The big one, being overly faithful, meaning very little narrative innovation. That dark kind of drab cone turned some people off, lost some whimsy. The pacing felt sluggish to many due to the longer runtime. Performances were mixed, especially Hiccup compared to the original voice. And, well, sometimes the CGI, despite being advanced, still looked a bit artificial.
Got it. A clear picture of the trade-offs. So pulling all these threads together from our deep dive, the bottom line seems to be this. How to Train Your Dragon 2025 is probably best called a maybe lavishly rendered but mildly soulless reboot.
It feels like a fair summary of the critical consensus.
It brings the story to life with amazing tech, no doubt. But because it follows the original blueprint so closely, there aren't many surprises, especially if you know the animation.
Right, familiar territory.
So for you, our listener, thinking about whether to see it, here are our specific takeaways based on the sources. First, definitely see it on the biggest screen you can find. IMAX, Dolby Cinema. That visual scale needs it.
Crucial for the flight scenes.
Absolutely. Second, if you've never seen the original, you'll probably be quite enchanted. The action, the look, the themes, they'll likely work really well for a newcomer.
A good entry point, perhaps.
Perhaps. But third, if you are a big fan of that 2010 classic, our advice, based on these reviews, is maybe rewatch the original first.
Set the baseline.
Exactly. Then treat this live-action one as, like, extra dessert. It's beautiful, technically impressive, sure, but don't expect it to rewrite the recipe.
Well put. It avoids the worst pitfalls, as Entertainment Weekly said, keeping the heart and tone.
Yeah, it doesn't totally mess it up, which is something for these remakes, but if you were hoping for something creatively bold, a real evolution, this seems to be more of a very reverent nod than a true rebirth.
And, you know, connecting all this back to that initial thought, this deep dive really leaves us and you with a fascinating question, doesn't it?
Go on.
When we revisit these stories we cherish in these new forms, what are we actually seeking? Are we looking for that perfect echo, something that just confirms what we already love? Or do we secretly, or maybe not so secretly, want something bolder? A reinvention that actually surprises us, maybe even challenges our connection to the original?
That is the perfect question to mull over. Are you looking to soar again on Toothless's tail in familiar skies, or hoping for a completely new flight path? Lots to think about. That's all for this deep dive.
Until next time.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep getting